Howdy gang, and welcome back to Pool School. In today's episode, I am going to show you how to lubricate the O-rings of a Pentair piston style backwash valve, whether it's a DE or sand filter. So what do you say we get going? Alrighty, before we get started, I want to thank you once again for watching. Remind you to like this video if you do, subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and please share my channel with everyone you know who owns a pool. Okay, so you have a Pentair sand or DE filter with a piston style backwash valve, and you need to lubricate the O-rings. From time to time, that's necessary. People ask me, well, how often should I do it? Well, it really depends. It's really based on feel. If you want a time frame, I really can't give it to you. When you have your backwash valve and it operates properly and it slides nice and easy, then everything's good. But then over time, as you're backwashing with regularity and stuff, or if you leave it for too long, which you shouldn't do because you should be backwashing your filter with some regularity, from time to time you'll start to feel, it starts to feel a little bit tighter, okay? And at that point, you don't want to start forcing things. That's an indicator. It's probably a good idea to lubricate the O-rings. And sometimes, on rare occasions, it's time to replace the O-rings, but more on that later. So it's really a matter of feel, what it feels like. And if it's moving easy, then you're fine. But if it starts to feel a little bit tight, things like that. Now, if the weather gets really, really cold, sometimes the lubricant gets a little tight and you have to loosen it up. But if you slide it up and down a couple times, you're like, oh man, you know what? It's feeling a little bit, it's not moving as easy. It's a good indicator that it is time to lubricate the O-rings. So that's kind of my best answer on how often or when you should. It's really a matter of feel. All right, now something that I always do, if I'm going to lubricate the O-rings of any type of backwash valve, piston style, whether it's Pentair or a Stay Right or a Jacuzzi or Hayward, okay, or any of those brands or anything like that, I'm always going to have a spare pair of O-rings for that particular backwash valve with me. The reason is because I don't know what I'm going to see when I open that backwash valve piston and I pull the piston out. I may find damaged O-rings, broken O-rings. I may find one, it's happened before, and I've done it where I've pulled it out and there's a broken O-ring and I don't have the O-rings, and then I have to go run and do that because I can't run the filter without getting that back in, okay? So I always have myself a spare O-ring kit for that particular backwash valve, so that way I'm covered in case I get into the thing and I go, oh, I've got a stretched out, damaged, or broken O-ring or more that I need to replace. Then I'm covered. All right, so as I said, I always have an extra set of backwash valve O-rings for that particular type of valve. In this case, it's the Pentair backwash valve piston style, okay? But I want to talk to you also about the tools that you're going to need to get the backwash valve out and lubricate it. First and foremost, I like to wear a set of latex or nitrile gloves. The reason I do is because I don't like getting the lubricant on my hands and my fingers. It's goopy, it's hard to get off, it makes for a mess, and my hands don't seem to like, and my skin doesn't seem to like the lubricants, so I prefer to do these. Then I can take them off, throw them away, and we're done. Okay, so that's the first thing I need. The next thing I need is I'm gonna need a flathead screwdriver, okay? The flathead screwdriver is going to help me get the piston out of the actual sleeve, all right? So a small flathead screwdriver. I would suggest a short one, even shorter than this, okay? You're also going to need just a small pair of pliers, all right? And that again is to help you get the backwash valve piston out of the sleeve, okay? And then of course you're going to need your lubricant. All right, my go-to lubricant that I like best, that I've found over time works best, it lasts the longest for me, it holds up the best in all kinds of weather, is a product called 820 Lube. It's made by Boss Products, and it's a silicone-based lube. There's another lubricant that people like to use. It's a Teflon-based lube. It's kind of common. It's called Magic Lube. I'm not a fan of it that much. I have used it when this isn't available, but I really prefer this because, like I said, I think it holds up better, it lasts longer, in my experience. Some of you may swear by Magic Lube, and that's great. Some of you may like the Teflon better, and that's great too, but I find that this one works best for me. It helps, it holds up the best, and it actually, to me, I find that I have to lubricate less with this, or less often, and it tends to protect the O-rings a little better, in my opinion, okay? So I use this to lubricate the O-rings, and then one more thing that I use that's kind of important, I'll show you why, there's a little trick to it. I always have a can of this heavy duty silicone spray, okay? This is basically a silicone lubricant. It's industrial strength. Don't get just the typical WD-40, all right? Get a industrial strength. Make sure it's industrial strength silicone lubricant, because there's a little trick to lubricating one of the O-rings in the piston that you can't really get to with your fingers, all right? So with that said, let's head over to a pool and let's take a look at a Pentair backwash valve and lubricate the O-rings. Alrighty, I'm at one of my clients' pools. You've probably seen this pool in some of my other videos. I've got my tools here, my products, I've got my lube, I've got my silicone industrial strength spray, more on that. I've got my flathead screwdriver, my pliers, and my glove, all right? So I'm gonna come back here real quick. We're gonna take a look at the filter. This again, oops, almost fell. This is the filter, and it is a Pentair Triton 2 sand filter. This is the backwash valve. And if you saw one of my videos on backwashing a sand filter, this is a valve. This is one of the pools that I've used. First and foremost, as always, anytime I'm pulling anything apart or putting my hands anywhere in a filter or pump, I wanna make sure that there is no way that this pump is gonna turn on. So the on tab is way up here. It actually goes on it in the evening, but there's no chance of it coming on, so I'm safe. If you need to, you can also hit the override switch. Sometimes they're equipped with them, and it's, I'm gonna see if it's in here. There it is. I can turn that off, and then hopefully, I hope I'm right, yep, it won't go on. So now I'm safe. All right, now I can get to work on this. Now, if you notice, this is why I said you want these little pliers. These are the two screws or nuts that I'm gonna need to take off. The problem is, screwdriver's too long. A lot of times it's like this. You can't get it in there, all right? I think that's somewhat of a design flaw. If you have a short, stubby flathead screwdriver, that'll fit there. But what I use for this side, I use a flathead screwdriver, so I'm gonna do that real quick. And it just, if you notice, see that little slot? And there's a slot there. This is a little sleeve, and I don't even take that off. I just leave that on. There's no need to. These would be the screws you would take off to do that. But these screws do nothing to hold this puck right here. So these two screws right here do nothing to hold this puck in place. It's just this screw and this screw. And there is a groove like this one on this side underneath this sleeve. It's just, you just can't see it. So when we put it back together, we want to line this up. So what I do is I just unscrew this, and it comes out pretty easy, and it's not something that I crank down super hard. Tightening this super hard doesn't make it seal better. It's the O-rings that seal it. So I'm gonna undo this. Once I get it hand loosened, I take it off. I'm gonna put the screw somewhere where I'm not gonna lose it. And then on this side, because I cannot get to it, I'm just gonna take my pliers and just loosen it up. Once I've got it loosened up, I can probably, now watch it make a liar out of me, I can probably hand unscrew it. I'm gonna hold this with the other hand and go right-handed here and unscrew this. All right, put that screw up there as well. And I'm gonna come back to my valve. Now this valve moves pretty good, but all I'm gonna do is just kind of wiggle it and just kind of lift it up. As I do, up it comes. Now, one thing, if you had the filter running a little bit, I would let the water pressure balance out or equalize so you don't have a ton of suction. A lot of times when you turn your filter off and turn the pump off after it's been running, water will balance itself or equalize itself and kind of sort of drain out of the system a little bit. We want to get that equalized so you don't have an excessive amount of pressure. Now, if you notice, there are 3 visible O-rings right here. Okay, I'm going to set this down on here so you can see it. There is the lower O-ring that sits on this puck, and we call these things pucks, these little round things. There is this O-ring here, and then there's this skinny O-ring right here. Now there is another O-ring that is inside here, and this has to all come apart to do that. I never, ever mess with that. I don't pull this apart. I've never had to. I've never had a situation where I've had to replace that O-ring. So in this type of backwash valve and the Hayward backwash valve, there's a little O-ring like that. And I'm not going to go into that one, but I'll show you again. That's what that spray lube is for, so we can get to that without having to open it up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put, first of all, I'm going to inspect the O-rings and make sure that they're in pretty good shape, okay? So there's a little dirt in there, which is fine. I can wipe that off. That O-ring looks good, and that O-ring looks good, okay? Now again, remember what I said, I always keep a set of the O-rings for these backwash valves available, so if I pulled this out and maybe one of these was stretched out or broken, I could just go ahead and replace it. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put on my glove, get my lube, I'm going to wipe these off a little bit just to clean them up, or this one especially because there's a little bit of dirt. See how it's a little dirty right there? I'm just going to wipe that off, and then I'm going to go ahead and lube them, and I'll show you how I do that. Alrighty, I've got my glove on and I wipe this off right here so it's nice and clean. You notice this part moves right here. That's one of the reasons I like to keep this on, because it just keeps everything tight in here. And this little piece, see that those little tabs right there? Can you see that right there? Those little wings, that holds that in place. When this is pushed down, see how this becomes loose? And then you can end up getting in there. Oh, there's some sand in there. Good thing I pulled that off. I can kind of clean that sand off, okay? There was some sand in there. So I close that on, and again, I tend to like to have this up like this and locked, which is why I don't take this off when I do this. That way it makes it easier for me to clean this, okay? So quick wipe off, and let's get out my lube, and let's lube these things, okay? So I'm gonna take this, I'm gonna start on the bottom and work my way up. And what I wanna do is I wanna get a plenty of lube into this O-ring, on this O-ring, and see that those grooves? I want to actually kind of fill that up. So I'm going to go around squeezing my lube and getting it into the grooves. And don't be afraid to use too much. You want to goop it in there. If you do just a little bit, you're going to be back at taking this apart and lubing it again in short time. So you want to get it good and lubed up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my fingers and force that lube into the grooves. Just kind of, if you ever packed a wheel bearing, it's kind of that way, but I'm just kind of getting it in there so it fills in those grooves, right? And I just kind of scrape some of it off. And I'm just kind of doing that, just kind of filling it in, right? Making sure that it's getting inside those grooves and that channel, okay? Now, if there's excess like that, I take it and I just rub it against the top one, because I don't need to pull that one apart. So I just use this for the top, and usually between the 2 pucks, that's enough. I'm gonna do the same thing with this one, but I'm not gonna make you watch it because it's the same thing I just did. So I'll be right back. Okay, now that I've gotten this lubed up, and a quick point, if you didn't have enough excess here, that's okay to use on this end. Just go ahead and squeeze some lube onto this and smear it around, and you'll be good to go, okay? Now, that little O-ring that's inside here, you can't even see it. There's an O-ring inside there that allows this thing to slide up and down like this. What I do, if you look inside that little in there, there's an O-ring in there, and it's a kind of a beast to get to. So what I do, instead of having to go in there with my lube and take this whole thing apart, which means I have to pull this pin out, slide this off, pull everything off, and then get to that O-ring, what I do is I just take some of this heavy-duty silicone spray lube, and I separate this. Remember what I did is I basically twisted this, slid it down. There's my opening, and I'm just going to spray some right in there. Okay, and just kind of move it around. All right, if you don't feel like doing that, you can just take some spray and spray it right down this pipe and spray it on the pipe, and it'll run in there. And then when you put it back in, you can just run it up and down, and that'll loosen it up. Okay, so that's the secret hack to how to lubricate this. Now this is all lubed up, let's go put it back in. Alrighty, so I'm back at my filter, and there's my backwash sleeve, and There's my piston. It's set. Remember this pin, again, if you know how to backwash your filter, I'm assuming you know how to backwash this type of Pentair filter, or use this type of backwash valve, that little pin stays there, right there. See where my finger's touching? We want that in place because it's gonna help me push it back in. Remember, I'm lining up that little slot right there with where that screw went in. So I'm just gonna gently nurse it down, kind of keep this in place so I can wiggle it. I'm just gonna kind of wiggle it and go straight down. And then I'm gonna push it into place. And it will seat in place. But sometimes it doesn't like to play fair, so I'm just gonna kind of adjust it again. See if I can get it back in there better yet, okay? There we go. There. And that's it. And it's in place. Now, what I do is I'm gonna take, and remember, I'm making sure that this groove right here is lined up with this hole. I take this screw, put it back in. And if you want to tighten it down now, you can, that's fine. If not, you can wait. And then you can take the one in the back, oopsie, dropped it. And you can put this one in the back here and screw it in. Now remember, the back one, because I can't reach it with a screwdriver, I'm gonna have to use my pliers. So I take my pliers, I tighten it in. Remember, don't crank this too tight. It just needs to be snug, okay? Because again, this just goes into that groove, and same thing on the other side, and it just holds it in place. So you don't need something fancy. Let me go get my screwdriver so I can get this other one in. Okay, I got my flathead screwdriver. I just screw this back in. Remember, don't have to crank it. I just want it snug so it seats into that groove and holds the backwash valve in place. Now again, if you know how to use these, up is for filtration, down is for backwash, and you notice how easy that turns now. So we're nice and lubed up, and then I fire the system up. Again, turning on my override switch. I already turned that one on, and the system fires up. And if I wanted to purge the air out, I could open this up and do that as well. But most of the time, the air is going to purge out anyway. It may take a second or two to prime, but that's pretty much it. Once you've done that, kind of take a look at it and go, let's see. No water leaks. I am in good shape. So that's pretty much it. Oh, one quick note, very important, regardless of the type of backwash valve you have, if it's a piston type, whether it's Pentair, PacFab, Jacuzzi, Stay Right, or Hayward, okay? Those little pucks that I showed you that the O-rings go on inside the valve, there are times when these valves, the piston gets old and the plastic gets old. I'm gonna flip this around real quick. And if you wait too long to lubricate your O-rings and this gets stickier and stickier, it is not uncommon for you to try to take this thing out one day and remove it, and that O-ring is broken inside and it's jammed it inside this sleeve. And because the valve, the piston itself is old and the plastic is old, remember, you've got plastic in water and corrosive chemicals, chlorine, acid, etc. And you try to lift this thing out and it breaks, leaving one of the pucks, if not both of the pucks, inside this sleeve. In that case, you're in deep trouble. It's really a pain. About if you're lucky, you can get a pair of needle nose, really long needle nose pliers, and try to wiggle it out and reach it down in there. But if you notice, you got a limited amount of space to do that. Most of the time, if you break a puck off in there, you've got to take this off and replace this entire backwash valve, the unit and everything. So it behooves you to, with some regularity, when you feel, remember I talked about feel, when you feel this getting a little bit tight and you're like, man, it's a little bit tight, it's probably a good idea to open it up, inspect your O-rings, lubricate the O-rings or replace them if they need it, put it back together, and then you will avoid ever having to get the puck stuck in there and having to either cut this out or figure out how to get that out of there. All right, so make sure you remember that. Don't wait too long to take care and maintain those O-rings. So folks, that is my video on how to lubricate the O-rings of a Pentair / PacFab piston style backwash valve. I hope it made sense. Remember, if you have any questions or comments, you can post them in the comment section below this video, or if you'd like, you can email me directly. And my email address, as always, will come across the bottom of the screen here. It is kennypoolschool@gmail.com. Once again, kennypoolschool@gmail.com. I want to thank you again for watching. Remind you to like, subscribe, and share. And as always, remember, have fun, be safe, and always, always, always watch those kids and elderly folk and your pets around water. And I'll see you next time.